Hello and welcome back to another Rush Duel Links deck profile, and this is our first profile of the Go Rush era now that Go Rush has been released into Duel Links as a new world. So this deck is Heroes, and Heroes is always going to be a fan favorite. Obviously this was Jaden's archetype, although some of these cards are going to look familiar, some of them are going to look brand new. So I guess the first thing we'll do is talk about our skill, Hero Rush Rising. So requirement can be activated by sending one card from your field to the graveyard, notably field, not hand or field, which I would prefer it if this was hand or field, but I think this deck is actually quite strong, so I don't think it really matters. And more often than not, you're going to want to send from the field anyway, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. If all of the monsters with 1600 or more attack in your constructed deck are light attribute warrior type monsters, and all of the monsters in your constructed extra deck are warrior type monsters. So this is quite important. Basically, anything that has 1600 or more attack in our deck has to be a light warrior, and our extra deck can only contain warriors, which means we can't play anything like a celestial warrior. Will be coming out in the future. So that can get a little bit annoying, because it would obviously be quite nice to be able to play maybe some of these other cards, but those would be dark warriors anyway, so it wouldn't really matter. But in future, there might be some cards that come out that do make this restriction a little bit annoying. But we can make one face-up monster on the field lose 600 attack and defense to the end of this turn. Now, attack and defense can actually be relevant. This won't come up too much, but being able to reduce defense is something we don't usually get to see with a lot of these skills, so pretty good. Then we can add one fusion from our deck or graveyard to our hand. Now, this is very, very important because this means we only actually have to run one copy of fusion because we have infinite access to it. Basically, we can turn any card that's on our field into fusion, which is really, really good. So, our boss monster, or I should say our main deck boss monster, Rising Hero Tantalum. So requirement, we can send the top card of deck to the graveyard. This card gains 400 attack, so 25 becomes 29. 29 is very relevant. There's some things this won't be able to attack over, right? Like a Blue Eyes White Dragon. This won't be able to attack over a Dragia Star, but a lot of the new fusion cards that are coming out are 28. We're thinking Cyber Twin, we're thinking the Metarions, and we're thinking Seven's Paladin. So this will clear quite a lot. And then if we have a face-up warrior-type fusion monster on the field, we can also return one face-up level 8 or lower monster on the opponent's field to the owner's hand. Now, there are some fusions, notably Cyber Twin Dragon, which is a level 8 monster. So, one thing we have done quite a lot is summoned out our Tantalum, had a warrior-type fusion monster on the field, and then just sent Cyber Twin Dragon back to the extra deck, which is really strong. Now, what warrior fusion monster are we getting out? Well, of course, it is Elemental Hero Flame Wingman. But of course, this is the Overrush Rare version, and we now have Chronicle Rare, so we can snazz it up a bit. This is our Elemental Hero Flame Wingman that we have customized, and doesn't it just look beautiful? It's pretty much the same as it was in TCG. It's made using Avian and Burstinatrix. It only has 2100 attack, which is its greatest weakness, but whenever it destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, we can inflict damage to our opponent equal to the original attack of the destroyed monster, which is pretty cool. So the idea is we'll get this out, we'll get out Tantalum. Tantalum can get rid of one of our opponent's monsters. We then weaken one of our opponent's monsters by 600 using the skill. Then we get to attack over it with a Flame Wingman, which means Flame Wingman can now clear 2600 and lower. So it's not ideal, right? It can't on its own clear 28s or 3000s, but it's still pretty good. And now we talk about the real MVP of the deck. This is Rising Hero Argent. This card is actually fantastic. So we can reveal one level 6 or 7 warrior type monster in your extra deck. So reveal the Flame Wingman. Then we can excavate the top 4 cards of our deck. We can add up to 2 excavated normal monsters listed as materials on the monster you revealed to meet the requirement into your hand. Place the other cards at the bottom of our deck in any order. So we reveal to our opponent Flame Wingman. Then we look at the top 4 cards of our deck. We can then add 2 of either Avian or Burstinatrix. We can add 2 Avian, 2 Burstinatrix, or 1 Avian and 1 Burstinatrix, or just 1 if there's only 1 there. And then add them to our hand, which is really, really good. So why is this effect specifically really good? Well, first off, this can +2 us, which is already really, really good. But if we can manipulate the top cards of our deck, we can influence getting a free plus. And one of the best ways to do so is going to be Avian Spell Tactics. Using Avian Spell Tactics, we can just put one of our vanilla heroes on the top of our deck, which guarantees Argent will give us a plus, which is really, really good. On top of the fact, Argent isn't the turn it's summoned effect and doesn't have to be the only monster on your field, which means if we're able to get this into the graveyard and then get it back, or put it back in our hand, for example, and summon it again, we can keep using this effect again and again and again. So one of our main combos is that we'll summon out Argent, and then we'll summon out Shitotsu the Talismanic Warrior, use its effect to get Argent back from the graveyard, and then use its effect again, and basically get to check the top 8 cards of our deck, which is really, really cool. So Shitotsu, another really cool card. If the only face-up monsters on your field are warrior types, we can place one card from our hand on the bottom of the deck, special summon a warrior type monster with 1000 attack and 1000 defense from your graveyard in face up defense position. So, as we already said, we can bring back Argent, but that's not the only card we can bring back, because guess who else has 1000 attack and 1000 defense and is a warrior monster? That's right, it's Avian. So we can use Shitotsu to get back Argent to use its effect, or we can just use it to get back Avian if we already have the Burst Dinatrix, and because of our skill, we always have access to Fusion, which means we easily have a Fusion monster, so Shitotsu, absolutely fantastic inclusion in the deck. Next up, we have Piercing Samurai. So if we have 3 face-up monsters on the field, we can send top card out to the graveyard. 1 face-up warrior type monster on your field gains Piercing. So pretty good, right? Because all of our big bosses are warriors. Tantalum is a warrior. Flame Wingman is a warrior. But worst case scenario, we can just make itself have Piercing, and oftentimes it will be enough to get a good chunk in. But if we do make Flame Wingman have Pierce, then we can clear something, get in for a big chunk of damage ideally, then if it also has high attack, burn our opponent for even more. So this can be a pretty deadly combo. Piercing Samurai, really, really powerful card. And what better card to pair with Piercing Samurai than Siesta Torero? So Siesta Torero is arguably a little bit weaker now, because this effect only works on level 8 or lower, and we are now starting to see Cyber End Dragons, we're starting to see Hyper Strike Dragon Dragia Star F, we're starting to see Seven's Paladin, and all of these cards are level 9 and 10. So Siesta Torero now has, I guess, less cards that it will work on, but there are still plenty of level 8 and lower monsters, and a lot of those monsters have very low defense values, which means we can flip them down, just attack over them with the Torero, or we could even get Piercing and Piercing Samurai, combine it with the Torero, and do kind of a big wombo. If we combine both of these cards with Elemental Hero Flame Wingman, we can also set up some really, really high damage turns, and it's one of my favorite combos in the deck. Then we just have our 3 Avian, and we have the 3 Burst Dinatrix. Not really much to say about these. They're okay statted, they're not great, but again, they're the fusion material. They're basically what we're going to be digging for the entire time. Then for our Legend spell, we have gone with Tribute to the Doomed. Tribute to the Doomed is absolutely... I want to say it's not necessary, but this deck can struggle to out things like a Maximum. It can struggle to out something like a Cyber End. So having an extra way to out those cards is always going to be really, really useful, as well as the fact that we can use Tribute to the Doom to, again, get rid of one of our opponent's defense position monsters and get an extra direct attack in. It's very versatile. The one negative with Tribute to the Doom is it's quite expensive. But other than that, this, in my opinion, is the best Legend to run. But we could also play Warrior Returning Alive. We did test this a little bit as well. Warrior Returning Alive feels better if we guarantee we're not going to need the Tribute to the Doomed. It just makes the deck flow better. It gives us access to all the tools. Toolbox in the graveyard is always a really, really valuable tool. But again, if we do run into one of those problematic decks that does get out one of those problematic monsters, Tribute to the Doomed is always going to be invaluable. Then we have Avian Spell Tactics. So if we have 2 or more face-up warrior type and or winged beast monsters, obviously this entire deck is warriors, so it's only going to be warriors. Destroy spell trap on the field. Again, really important effect. Popping back row is always going to be really, really important. Then we can place 1 level 8 or lower warrior type or winged beast monster from your graveyard on top of your decks. So notably, we can use this to put Tantalum back on the top of the deck if we feel like we need it. We can use it to put Argent there, but most of the time we'll be putting our vanilla heroes back so we can combo them with Argent to get them into our hand. So this card just has extra value, which I really like. Then we have Talismanic Seal Array, and this card is absolutely bonkers when combined with Flame Wingman. If we're able to, let's say our opponent has a 2500 attack monster that's level 7. If we activate the effect of Talismanic Seal Array, we can reduce that monster down by 1400 down to 11. We can then use our skill to get it down to 500. Flame Wingman will then clear it, dealing 1600 damage, and then we'll burn our opponent for an extra 25 on top. So that's just 4100 damage from a single attack, which is really, really good. We also do need the TSA to clear, again, maximums. We need it to clear things like Cyber End Dragon, anything that's just a little bit too big that the rest of the deck can't deal with. TSA is going to have our back, and recycling cards is always going to be useful because, again, we don't want to deck out. We always want to have cards available in our deck. There are some cards that we want to keep in our graveyard to be toolboxed, but we don't want everything in our graveyard all the time. So TSA, really, really cool. Then we have the single copy of Fusion. Again, we do need this to fuse our monsters. They have to be face up on the field. That's quite a big thing. But we only need to run 1 because the skill always gives us access to this card. For our Legend, we're playing Negate Attack. Now, you could play Trap Hole as well. We're specifically playing Negate Attack in here because I think it's more useful against more things, especially on the ladder grind when you're going to be running into maximum decks a lot more. You'll be running into a lot of decks that will try and just kill you out of nowhere. I do think Negate Attack is better. If you're playing against maybe a more combo-centric deck, maybe another fusion deck, it might be better to play Trap Hole to kind of stop them in the middle of their combo. But Negate Attack has done us well so far. And then finally, Buffered Slime. And this is in here for a similar reason. Basically, Cyber Twin is everywhere on ladder right now. So being able to stop that is always going to be really, really valuable. Again, does have more limited application against those higher level monsters. But this will still work if your opponent attacks in the wrong order. If they attack with a low level monster first and we activate Buffered Slime, even that high level monster still won't be able to get damage in. So it's something to take note of. But how does the deck play? The deck feels very, very good. We did brick on this deck a few times just by having a few too many Tantalum in hand, but I don't really want to cut any Tantalum out. I think so far this has been pretty good and pretty fine. I should probably also mention that we do have 3 copies of Crescent Moon Swordsmaster. This is just in here to have 6 cards in the extra to not let your opponent kind of know what you're up to. Because if they see 0, they're going to know you're not in a fusion deck. If they see 3, they can make kind of an informed decision. Maybe you're just playing the Flame Wingman. If they see 6, well, you might be playing anything. You could be playing any kind of fusion deck, right? That's the logic, but we haven't really played with the other decks enough to really know how many fusion monsters they'll run yet, but that's what we're going with at the moment. So there is also notably some cards that we're not playing. We're not playing Ether Seeker, Finder, or Striker. The reason is I've tested these cards a little bit. I didn't find them particularly useful. I think the cards are fine. They're not bad. I don't think they make the deck worse. It's just another direction you can take the deck. And I don't feel like it really fit our style. They didn't come up very often. And overall, I wasn't a huge fan of these cards, but I'm not saying they're bad. I just think they're not necessary. I think it's just 2 different ways to play the deck. And I think if you want to play with the Ether cards, that's completely fine. I just prefer this version myself. But the skill is really, really good. One of the star plays that we kept making today was that we would summon out Argent, use Argent's effect, then we could summon a Shitotsu, use the skill, send Argent to the graveyard, target Shitotsu, and then weaken Shitotsu down by 500 if your opponent doesn't have a face-up monster. Then we could use Shitotsu's effect to get rid of a card from our hand to bring back the Argent in defense and then use Argent's effect again and effectively get to look at the top 8. But another important thing the skill does is it allows you to make room for fusions. A lot of the time in Rush, because you've only got 3 zones and to perform a fusion summon you need to have 2 zones empty, you'll end up clogging your zones and be unable to make a fusion. But using the skill, we can get rid of one of those monsters and then make room to summon out both monsters and fuse them together, which is really, really powerful. A lot of other decks will struggle because they don't have access to this. And it's another reason why Tantalum is so good, because again, he can free up zones. So very, very important, just because tributing over your guys will naturally make room. So if we have 3 monsters out, we tribute 2, summon out Tantalum, and then we can use the skill to get rid of the other one or our Tantalum itself, summon out both of our vanilla heroes, and then go into a fusion. So this deck has performed very, very well, and it's been very, very fun. This deck, I believe, off the top of my head, went around 24 wins to 3 losses, but I will say we were playing on ladder on day 1, so people were trying out new stuff. Most of our wins were against Cyber Dragon, so I guess you could say this deck has a good win rate into Cyber Dragon specifically, but we did take games off of a lot of different decks. Overall, my first impression of this deck is it seems very, very strong. It seems very, very fun, and I think when we actually get some real testing in and we get to play against some of the more tournament-ready decks actually during tournaments, we'll get to see where this deck really fits in and if it is very powerful. But let's fire in some replays so I can show you what I've been talking about.